Thank you very much for having me. Worked with Roger, as he said, a couple of years ago with a project for Borders College, and we were packaging up learning for students, trying to show them the progression through their studies and trying to also demonstrate the skills that they acquire in college but might not be reflected in their qualifications. So it was a really interesting project and very honoured to be invited to talk to you about service design today. I could talk about it all evening until tomorrow, but I'm trying to keep it short and see if we've got time for a little bit of an activity at the end of it. But part of the fun of being a service designer is that we've got like a toolkit with lots of activities, so we get to do things and not talk too much. So see how we get on. Also, if you, Seb and I were at a conference last week, and some of their presenters didn't take any questions. They talked to me at the end, others took question at the end, and others took question throughout the presentation. I thought it was quite interesting. A bit nerve-wracking to know where the questions are going to take you, but I've been looking for an opportunity to prototype this and test it. So if you want to interrupt, please raise your hand and we'll see how it goes, and maybe you'll crash, but at least I'll learn not to do it again. So, thank you.
How we're going to drive pages, I'm not quite sure, because I've opened that, so should we see if we can open it in PowerPoint?
I don't know about that, but anyway. So before we start, I was wondering, had anyone heard about service design apart from reading on the blurb that it was today's topic? Oh, cool. So, good. And how many of you practice it? Is there anyone? 1, 2, great, excellent. So we found 4. So if we break it into groups, then you can intervene, or if you can keep me right as well, if I'm saying talking nonsense. But anyway, I came from a lot of service designers come from art school and design school, design background. I came to service design from a business background. I studied politics in France, and then worked as a business analyst in a bank in the States, and then worked for the Royal College of Nursing, had my own business for a while, then worked for Glasgow City Council in their smart city a few years ago. So started as a service designer about 4 years ago, and it's a really fascinating way of working that really weave everything that I had worked on until then. And I hope to sort of leave like an hour or so to scratch the surface, but give you a little bit of a taste of it, so you can see how you might look into it better depending on the jobs that you do or the interests that we have.
Yeah, keep going now. Keep going. I'm getting there. I've got to do quite a bit of flirting.
Just put it in PDF. It's fine.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you're okay like that.
Yeah, it's fine.
Right. Okay. So we have a little widget here.
Great. So that was me asking you what you know about service design. Service design, we're not complicated people. Service design is the design of services. That's what it says on the tin. But interestingly, we try to think of what a service is. Oh, great.
Forward and backwards.
Put my phone back on. So service design is the design of a service, not very complicated. And a service is something that helps a user do something. Again, it sounds really simple, but when you think of it, for example, if we take the example of tonight's event, it's a service. It's helping you do something. When we start poking into what is it exactly that it helps you do, that you would take away at the end from your normal day-to-day life, at the end of a busy day, and you choose to come here, what are you hoping to get out of it? Learning something new that you can take back into your work and make your work more interesting and cover new ground, make our professional lives more fulfilling. And we think that we spend more time with our colleagues than our family. Making our professional life fulfilling is a really important goal that we might have. Or it might be that you want to be better at your job, so you do better for your customers or better for your users because you're passionate and you want to support them. Or is it because you're better at your job, you might have a promotion, you earn more money and you want to support your families. All these things are very important, and we should be very respectful of what our customers or our users are trying to accomplish and be quite humble in how we approach it, but also think ahead, because depending on what your motivations are for coming here today, it'll influence your expectations, it'll influence your needs, it'll influence what you think of it, it'll influence your participation. So when we're trying to work with a retailer recently, and a retailer by nature thinks of products. So they sell things. But actually they're really innovative, and they're trying to think of themselves as a service provider, which for a retailer selling things is quite revolutionary. What are they helping their customers do? Are they trying to help the customers feed their families and feel good about the way they look after their family, give them school uniforms so that they turn up all dapper and self-confident on the first day? That's really important. And if you can convey that importance to your staff, they're going to react differently when the customers is bugging them because they can't find the right shade of grey in their school uniform. So it's really understanding our users. And this is understanding users is the fundamental principle, what we try to do day in and day out, and really trying to understand people, not just as users, not just as customers, not just as the relationship that they have with the organisation, so not just as BCS members, but that they are parents, that what's happening in their jobs, really understanding in depth who they are. The gentleman here is an actor who came to film a mini story about his journey, and we were doing a project on social housing and capturing the future needs of customers. If you think of a social housing or a housing association, they have to plan needs 20 years ahead, because today, for example, we have an inadequate stock. We have bigger houses and smaller families. We have a lot of 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom house, and a lot of people who need a 1-bedroom house. Understanding the user needs 20 years ahead means that you understand the products and the stock that you will need 20 years from now. And one of the personas, or one of the stories that we heard over and over in the research, was about young people leaving care and finding themselves having to work out housing quite a young age, 16, 17, and 18, and being a little bit lost. And to protect the privacy of the people we worked with, we asked him to tell his story. It turns out it was very close to his own story. So if you go to our website, you can look at it. And so customers are at the heart of everything, and understanding people is at the heart of everything. But this is my pyramid of value, my contribution to service design, inspired by, have you seen those cards, the peg of happiness? No? I need to put it on my slide. Anyway, so the pyramid of value, because for us, a service that works is a service that works for the users. It helps the users do what they need to do. It helps me get my book, my school uniform. It helps me tell the city council that there's now a new 18-year-old in my family and I need to pay my council tax differently. It helps the users do what they need to do. It generates value for the organisation. In a private context, it might be shareholder value, and that's how we measure it. In a public sector context, it would be helping local authorities or public organisation meet the legal obligation that they have to carry out, but also allow them to do the things they want to do because they have a political will behind it. We've been working with a few councils with tackling poverty strategies, and they go way beyond what they're legally obliged to do. They really serve their customers and serve the citizens and the residents. So it works for the users, it generates value for the organisation, however we choose to measure it. But also, and that is one of the aspects where service design is a little bit different from other perspectives, is that it works for the staff. And by staff, we mean from the CEO all the way down to the frontline staff, to the cleaners, to the janitors, we've been planning a project about schools, and we're really trying to map everyone who comes in the school, from parents, children, janitor, din ladies, volunteers, teachers, assistant teachers, head teacher, deputy head teacher, anyone who might come into the school. Let's see how we can involve them, and we really need, it needs to work. We can't provide future experiences at the cost of today's experiences. We can't implement a tackling poverty if we are doing it and we're burning out our staff. And it's the same thing for every organisation. We need to make sure that we have a sustainable workload and sustainable experience for our staff. So, understanding customers, the pyramid of value, so that it meets the needs of all stakeholders, and it also have that end-to-end journey. So if we think about the products earlier as well, we often think of the experience of using the product, but we don't go much earlier on. When is the first time that you heard of that product or you heard of that service? Did you hear it from someone else? Did you use something else before and it went wrong? So you're a little bit wary, or it went well, and then it sets your expectation for that interaction. Did you need somebody to help you? So going really, really early on in the experience, when were you first aware of that need that this service might help you fill? And then going all the way out as well, all the way down as well, talking with that retailer. They've started designing and researching the experience once the customers leave. So if you think of it, you've bought clothes, or you've got your tin tomato for tonight's dinner. For the retailer, it could stop the minute you leave the store. You've paid, you're happy, you've got your shopping bag, you're on your way. But actually, there's a great insight if we start thinking about how people get home, might influence the bags and that can influence the weight. How do they store the products that they've bought? How do they wash them if they are clothes? How do they receive, if it's digital services, do they receive email? Do they receive them on their phone? How do they? Do they have any assistive technology that you need to think of? Really looking at that end-to-end experience, including every little detail, because it's in those little details that an experience becomes quite cumbersome and just doesn't work, and you give up, or you get really annoyed, or people get excluded because they don't have that perseverance, or they don't have the skills to continue engaging with the service. So customers, meeting all the needs of stakeholders, that end-to-end user journey. And then the other thing that service design looks at is aligning the front-end experiences, the customer experiences, with the back-end. So if I am an organisation, you're sending me your application for a community grant, for example. If you're sending it, I'm receiving it. Is it going to the right person inside the organisation? Or you're dropping it off on paper at the customer desk, and then I need a digital copy, so somebody is going to scan it and email it to me. Great. Do I even tell you that I have received your application and what I'm going to do with it? And then do I tell you how long you can expect before I get back to you with a yes or a no, or with more information? Maybe I need to pass it to you, and then you pass it to someone else, and you pass it to someone else, and in the meantime, you're waiting. You have no idea what's happening, and it's really frustrating. The worst thing is you pick up the phone and you phone the organisation, and depending on how the organisation is set up, then it costs a lot of money for the organisation to pick up the phone, dig through their system, tell you where it is, somebody has to call you back and call back again and again. I'm being a little bit trivial about it, but actually we have redesigned services where there might be a 3-month wait before you hear anything back. And is it normal? The problem, as I say, have you received it? Are you doing with it anything with it? Aligning those front end and back end are absolutely crucial, and especially when we talk about working with a deprived community who might not have the skills or the self-confidence or the tools to keep pushing or to keep trying. We need to, it's the right thing to do for the users, but it is also the right thing to do for the organisation, because they'll work much more seamlessly and save resources. So, looking at users, that triple value, the end-to-end, and aligning the front end and the back end. And you can chat to all the other service designers who are also in the room, but we also tend to be a little bit different from others, and we've picked left and right all the cool things that they were doing and tried to incorporate them in a way. So you've had talks about Agile. Most of the projects in service design run as Agile project. At least some form of Agile, not always strictly speaking Agile. But one of the principles definitely is to dream big. We were talking a little bit earlier about a fairer society, about an economy that works for everyone. So we dream really big. We have high goal, but we start very small. We start with the low-hanging fruit, the less risky projects, the one not particularly high on anybody's political agenda, especially if when the elections or referendum are coming up, we'll stay clear from. So just to get those small projects with a measurable impact, with a story that people tell. We were talking about as well how change is tricky. People are fearful of change. But if you start with smaller stories that demonstrate benefit, almost de-risk, then you can build that narrative, that change actually, yeah, it's going to be hard, but it's going to be okay. And little by little, people can see the benefit, especially if you have those people stories to attach to them, to demonstrate how it's worth it. Doing, not talking, quite ironic if I'm standing talking at you for 45 minutes, so hopefully I'll speak even faster and we can get to a little activity to look at future scenarios and what's on our mind, what's the challenges that our organisations are facing. One of the experiences that will always stay with me was we were designing a future city tool, something. And there were 4 of us around the table, all discussed it, and we were all about to walk away, saying, yes, we've got it, everybody agree, we're all on the same page, let's go and get on with it. And somebody said, let's stop, can you please sketch it? And we're like, oh, well, we've already agreed. No, please sketch it. And we sketched 4 different things, and here's like 4 of us. You know, we had worked together for a long time already, and we had 4 completely different things in mind. So you can imagine what it looks like down the line when they come back with the code and test it, and you're like, oh, that's not what I meant at all. So the first thing is to do it, and do it on paper, sketch it with an iPad, we sometimes build cardboard boxes to pretend it's a service, and we mock up what those conversations might look like in the future, just to, yeah, do it, stop talking about it and do it. Working openly, that's really scary at first. We all like showing something shiny, beautiful, worked up, gotten rid of all the pitfalls that we could have come across. And actually that's completely the wrong thing to do. Just the first thing you come up with, put it up on the wall, preferably by the coffee machine, so that people will linger back when the kettle is boiling, so they have a look, and then they can say, you've missed this bit. Wouldn't you rather know when it's on paper on the wall than once you've developed it? Or they will say, you should talk to so-and-so, they've done something similar, or so-and-so would be able to use something like this, they've been talking about it. So the more you put it out in any format that you can, be quite bold. You can put it up on the wall, you can write blogs about it, use social media, you can also run, we call them show and tell, I don't know if somebody's mentioned it before, but it's just a quick presentation or quick simulation, bring people in the office and talk to them. Building capacity, favourite principle from Montessori is teach me to do it myself. And it's apparently a terrible business model of saying, we'll come into the organisation, we'll do it with you at the beginning, teach you how to do it, and then we'll go away. Apparently a better model would be to just try to stay on forever. But that doesn't work. We need people in the front line to just do this stuff. It's not that complicated. And yes, bring on more service designers when you need to reach another stage, or you've got some particularly tricky conversation or some tricky project. Yeah, surely bring them back in, but aim to learn this by yourself so that it can be done inside the organisation. And there are some pretty big organisations doing it, like Scottish Government, UK Government, and most big companies. Service design, I say, we've begged and borrowed from lots of other disciplines to weave a very specific way of working and approach, but it's at heart a multidisciplinary approach. And this is a good time to mention that we're hiring, so if you like any of this, then please come and talk to us, because we need people coming from different backgrounds. So one of my colleagues is really, really good at working with young people, and she can infuse energy in the room like no one else. I'm particularly interested in data and in mental health. Not many jobs where I could do those 2 things at the same time, whereas some of my colleagues go, data, really? Is it an Excel spreadsheet? I don't have to use it. So we need people from different backgrounds to come into service design train so that they bring their own experience and their own way of looking at things as well. And also make it fun. And sometimes that's the first thing people see. It's the Lego and the Play-Doh and the little people and the wooden iPad. But actually that's because this is NHS Ayrshire and Ireland, and I think, I can't remember exactly what his job title was, we'll have to cut that out of the film. But anyway, he's really, it's one of the most senior in the organisation, coming to an event, working for 2 days with people at every level of the board, all the way down to ambulance drivers and community members and patients and nurses, and trying to crack the issue of unscheduled care, or at least make headway. So we use the artifacts of like Lego and Play-Doh just to make it fun, but they have a really serious purpose of looking behind the words, looking behind the conversation that we're having. What's in your mind that you're not necessarily expressing with words? Or if we all work together, then there's something behind, if we all collate our ways of working that we can come across. I've just highlighted 3 projects, and then hopefully, this isn't working, but hopefully we'll still have time to do a little bit. Brought projects, 3 projects, one from the private sector and the public sector, and charities show the breadth of work out there. A lot of private sector, and I'm sure it's the same thing for other service designers, a lot of the work in the private sector is under non-disclosure agreement, which is a little bit of a shame. I understand they want to protect their commercial interest, especially when we're talking about their cutting-edge development and future strategy. But at the same time, there's a lot to be said for sharing across sectors. These private companies have a lot of staff coming from the UK government, GDS, so and then they're moving on to the charity sector. So there's a lot of cross-pollination that we can do. So we're certainly trying to push really hard to get people to open the story of their project and let us talk about it, even if we don't mention any name. These guys are happy for us to talk about. It's a technology that is light-based, and they've created those lights that you can attach to fishing nets. And depending on how you program it, it will repel the fish you don't want to catch, and it will attract the fish that you want to attract. So when you know that 1 out of 5 fish is chucked back out to sea, that's £1 billion a year and 27 million tonnes globally, if I've remembered my figures properly. It's obviously a huge waste and a cost, and every minute counts for fishermen. So it's an amazing technology. But again, thinking back to what I was talking about, it's a product. Now you need to think of the service around it. How do you get fishermen to embrace new technology? So we had 2 of our designers hop on a train to Cornwall on the day of the Beast of the East. I wasn't very pleased about that. I'm never letting them forget it. But anyway, they went to the local pub, because stuff had nothing to do with user research, but they're starting to work with fishermen, starting to think, how do you embrace a new product? How do you test it? It's not, technology is never a quick investment. So they found out, for example, that we need to find who are these fishermen already trusting when it comes to their gear. It's a question of life and death. They're not going to buy some people they don't know. They have their trusted suppliers. So we need to convert those trusted suppliers before we can hit the fishermen. Or, for example, that lease will work better than buying for tax reasons. So it's all getting those tiny details wrong. If your product is amazing, you haven't thought of a service around it, it probably wouldn't work. Sometimes it does, but North Lanarkshire Council, if they're a really inspiring council, the way they work. I'm working with Peter Tolan, their CTO, who says that every freedom of information request is a service failure. Freedom of information, for those who don't know maybe, is that you can request information from public sector organisation, and unless they can prove that it will be too expensive, they have to provide it to you, as long as it's not personal or sensitive information. So North Lanarkshire's policy on it is that if we're allowed to release that information, then we should just release that information without waiting for an FOI request. So when we get an FOI request, it's because we haven't done our job properly to explain that it's already out there, to explain that you can't get it, or that someone else is already publishing it. And that way, FOI request is really doing its job of transparency by pulling the information out there and not waiting for people to request it. So we worked with them. A little bit of a different approach in that we started from the user needs that we already know, which is the requests coming in. And we focused, again, starting small, on one service. We worked on business rates, which costs Snowflash about £30,000 a year. So £30,000 worth of work is being done every year, going through the business rate files to extract that information and put it in a PDF and put it on the website. So we started from the user needs and streamlined the inside of the service to put it on an open data platform in a format that has all the information, not just a subset of it, depersonalized so that there's no, for example, some businesses are not incorporated businesses, they're personal businesses, so there might be a personal address, might be a personal name, we can't use that, the council can't publish that. And putting it out there just once and for all, regularly, in a way that works better, going back to a service that works for the staff, we need to free capacity within the organisation before we ask them to do more work. And the last one I picked from the charity sector was with Comic Relief, Chain, and other organisations, looking how might we use technology to support domestic violence victims and survivors. And it was really interesting because it's an interesting topic. It's a really, really hard topic, obviously. It was interesting on two accounts. It's the fact that we partnered with other organisations who are specialists, who have done this type of work for a long time, who have really strong link with the communities that we would be working, that we just don't turn up going, oh, hello, what would technology help you? It would be really dangerous to work that way. We really need to work with communities who are in this field day in and day out. So the collaboration is interesting. The other thing that was interesting as well is the fact that I'm sure some of the organisation here will have faced this. There's a funding call or funding grant or an opportunity for technology to do this or technology to do that. But actually, this is already solution driven. What are the needs behind it? And Comic Relief was really interesting in that they had a project in two phases. The first phase in the project was researching the needs and coming back with design challenges that are really solid, evidence-based, detailed enough, have all the research behind it that you can actually then start thinking about solution. So for example, there's 5 design challenges, but I'll pick just one, which is that 15 minutes. Domestic violence victims and survivors said that they only have 15 minutes to find information. They have only 15 minutes of freedom away from the perpetrators to find information or to flee or look after themselves or do what it is they need to do. Now, if a website is clunky, then it will take 15 minutes to find the information in the first place. That window is shut, they need to move on, and that opportunity is missed. What could we do in that 15 minutes? So those are design challenges, evidence-based, got all the research behind it. You'll see on the website, there's lots of stories and things like this. And then on the back of it, the funded challenges, but making sure that the design challenges or the funding challenges that we set out have a lot more depth for the startups or groups to tackle. That's me. Oh, more doing. Do we still have time?
Yeah, we've got about 20 minutes more.
So we can choose. Do you want to do questions or do you want to do a little activity on future scenario planning? You've got 30 seconds to choose. Activity, cool.
More doing this.
Paper, but I've got Sharpies and I've got Post-it, so I've come prepared. If you want to circulate this as quickly as you can, there's not, like maybe a group of 4, if you huddle up. 4 or 5.
Should we share?
Join our here. Find a way to So the first thing you're going to do, use the back of the page to as quickly as you can, and I'll time you. I'll give you maybe a minute and a half or 2 minutes if I'm generous, to think of all the deep challenges, the really tricky things that your organisation is facing in the next 10 years. Yeah? Just 2 times. Well, keep it quickly. There might be a prize for the group with the most post-its. Post-its. All the challenges on the post-its. On the post-its, write all the challenges as quickly as you can that your organisation is facing over the next 5, 10, 20 years. You've got 30 seconds. So now you're going to pick. So what do we have to read here? Do we have technology issues? We've got technology issues. We've got environmental issues. I heard somebody saying about young people with the right skills, something like this. Yeah, eavesdropping. What else do you have? Changing public expectation of service delivery, decreased funding. Obviously, going to be so you pick 2 of those. Again, I'll give you a minute to agree on 2 of those.
2 as a whole group or 2 as an
2
individual?
as a whole group.
Just to amend,
because more services are being, public services are being increased with back, and yet the rates are going up. How do you want to
So what do you mean by technology? I'll make up something. And then the other one?
Yeah, so it's a bit like.
So I think
It sounds like we've got a technology kind of one.
hello.
Those 3 are.
Now, I picked on this group here, and they have picked 2 themes. The first one is around skills, and the second one is technology. And so what are the 2 extremes in the future? Skills? I'm just making it up. You can choose whatever you want after that. Skills. All the jobs in the future are highly skilled. And then the opposite would be all the jobs in the future are low-paid, unskilled jobs. Right? These are the 2 extremes on that skill that are completely made up as I talked to you. And the other one is technology. So the 2 extremes on this one might be everything we do is driven by technology. And the other extreme could be there's been a backlash against technology and we've all ditched our phones and realised that Alexa is listening to us. And we have all removed technology from our lives. These are the 2 extremes of your axis. And then you can put them. So in this future, there's no technology, high technology, low skills, high skills. And then once you've done that, you can start exploring what happens in the world with high technology and low skills. Or what's happening in the world with low technology and high skills. And you can start exploring each quadrant and what the world might look like. And it's interesting to see if there's a new understanding, a new idea, or new problems that might come up in the future that you need to start planning, designing, and researching just now. Okay? Are you all okay? See what you have to do? Those two axes, the two straight longitudes that they
Yeah. I suppose that's the sort of solution, isn't it? Well, I think what she said, you can come up with the same thing. Yeah, just go with it. Yeah. We've got a Brexit one as well. And then you've got the uni and high school, maybe that's the
Yes, exactly. In order to maintain
you've got low technology, you've got great high skills. So the difference is because you're not so dependent on knowledge and experience, whatever to get complex tasks done. You've got to manage your organise better. If you've got to write it.
An example of another group is high technology being used for manual tasks. So if you're filling out application form online and that comes through and hits that's actually a robot populating the database.
High skills are going to need
No.
that skill base.
So when you're an engineer, is a job opportunity.
exactly people want specific. Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. Yeah. People want more or less funding. Yeah. Now I think of help. What happens if we invested? Exactly. What happens if we started investing?
Yeah.
maybe probably some early age to get access.
So they've got Halifax, Wales, Scotland, Scottish Widows. If you had a one-stop shop, then you can see your mortgage, your insurance, your credit, one place. If that's what people want.
I have a few minutes to look at the different scenarios that might arise. Looking at, up here we had a group looking at people have higher and higher expectations of public services. They want more and more from the health service, for example. And then the other dimensions was one side has degrees funding and the other one has unlimited funding. So what happens when there's higher expectations and no funding? When there's higher expectation and there's unlimited funding, we're talking about it in another group as well. What happens when these unlimited funding, we start dreaming, but actually we can also start spotting some issues that might arise. Or one of them went a little bit further, it's lost opportunity, resentment, unmet expectation. But if we have unlimited funding, then we can start integrating services and have the technology for services to talk to each other, for example. So looking at these different scenarios, you can, discussing it as well, you can look at them within your organisation and the challenges that your organisation is facing. But also when you put them in the context of societal challenges or economic challenges at a bigger scale, then you're trying to anticipate a little bit what might be happening. And this is obviously like a 10 minutes whistle tour of one tool, but it's like an entire toolbox, and a lot of those tools are available on the internet. You just search service design tools, and they're trying to get their more supported conversations so that we start discussing them as with real ideas, not just in general terms. Does anyone have questions?
I've got a question.
Yeah.
How long would it take to go through this process with all the tool sets that are available to you? Quite a large group of people. Days?
I think how long is a piece of string? But is what can. But actually, the first thing for any project is we start having a conversation about what it is we're trying to achieve. And we often have conversation with clients in organisation where they come to us with a problem and we do a tiny bit of work and we realise that the problem is only a symptom of a bigger issue. So the first thing is to dig a little bit deeper into what is the problem, what the problem we think we have. And then go the next stage is, okay, is it really the problem or is it something else? And then after that you do your user research and then you do your design. And there are lots of ways to go about it, but there's not a set way. So think of it in the toolbox. You will pick the approaches and the tools, and that's why we need those multidisciplinary team who will be able to say, oh, we need a bit more of this and we need a bit of that, and all the projects have a flow to them, or most projects have a flow and a logic that is similar. They are very different in nature depending on the problem we're trying to solve. And projects will last between 4 weeks, are some of the quickest. When there's a concise problem, or just like a taste of saying what is the problem that we're having to begin with, or when there's an urgent need to sort something quickly. Between 4 weeks, and some of them are long transformation programs, like in government, they might last years, but they will run as short 6 to 8 weeks, 12 weeks phases. So that there's something, it's not like a 2-year, let's build these giant projects that never see the light of day, but actually let's break them down in chunks so that we can see after 4 weeks, where are we making progress? Is it what we think, is the problem what we think it was? If we decide to build something, let's work on it for 4 weeks, put it out there, what do people think? Does it have value, does it have legs? Can you go on? Don't you think?
Yes.
This approach seems that I can't figure out how it fits in with enterprise architecture, because it doesn't seem to be something that I would see sort of plugging into it in various places, because it almost seems to cover the same area of interest, but from a different perspective. So I'm not sure whether this is in competition with enterprise architecture, or if it integrates and complements it. How does it do so?
It's certainly not a competition. Can you give me a little bit more? They work together, so it's an approach to. Is it just an approach to do something?
So, would you take a small area that manifests itself within a bigger picture, enterprise architecture picture, and this would then be deployed to tackle that smaller area that had a sort of cohesive identity of its own?
Yes. I think if I'm getting this, if I understand your question correctly, but it's almost like
myself.
it's almost like you can use it at any level. So yes, you can use it if so. For example, the FOI project that I was talking about, it works within the existing architecture. We try to work as much as possible to work within the existing architecture of the organisation, and just at the end we noticed that architecture was missing some a system, so to allow them to do that. and they didn't have those functionalities. So we helped them choose one and plug it in the architecture, following the normal procedure and processes and checks that they have. But it can also work the other way of, if you think of the architecture in itself as a project, you can also use, when we talk about service design, we often talk about the external side of service design, of working with customers, working with external users, but we have to think of ourselves as internal services for our colleagues. And the architecture is a service to the organisation, and in that sense you can also apply service design to it.
Kind of reminds me a little bit of, do you know when UX first started taking off as a role and you had business analysis?
Yes.
And it was kind of, there was a lot of rubbing with those two roles initially, because like BAs were saying that they did the wireframing and they did the requirements, and UX designers were like, well, we respond to needs. So it's kind of, there is a little bit of that, I guess, and there is kind of, but I think it works itself out over time. I think they are complementary. It just sometimes takes a little bit of time.
That's where having all the right people in the room helps. If you've got the full spectrum, then everyone has a part to play in that. You cover all bases.
Because business analysis has never gone away.
Nope.
It's just kind of become a little bit more focused, I guess. And service design probably isn't going anywhere, and enterprise architecture isn't. It's just you kind of learn how they start to complement each other.
And I think it's where having, as you say, the multidisciplinary team is, because you need people who have that understanding of what an architecture is. I'm sure if we told some service design about enterprise architecture, they'd go. Or even BA. I started as a BA, so to me that's like, I could easily jump between one and the other. But it's building that common language as well, and the architect might be going, who are these people turning up and messing with my system, So it's building that common language, and this is why I've got this slide about starting small, is if you start on a relatively easy project, then you build that confidence, you start trusting each other and build that language so that you at least are able to have those conversations and know what the other person is talking about.
I think one of the strongest elements that I've seen that recommends this approach is in Scottish Government in some cases, where they track user journeys, which are pretty standard methodology, but they add in the emotional reaction of the person involved. And so one of the challenges in change is about acknowledging and calling out that people have emotions, and they have fears and they have concerns, and sometimes the person that's in charge of the enterprise architecture is actually really struggling to keep up with what's now possible today. And so when they're involved in conversations, and you mentioned the words, why are we doing that when we can put it to the cloud, you get a conflict when you're coming in. And the great thing about this is it says that's okay. It says we're all going to feel emotional about these sorts of situations. And so by getting people together to talk about that, you can start to peel away some of that and reassure those people who are very scared about what the future may actually hold for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is where, I think my first slide about understanding people, to me those emotions, they're very important material. If somebody is not comfortable with something, we should listen very carefully. They're not trying to make your life harder for the sake of making your life harder. It's because they know something that you don't. And it might have been one of their previous experiences, it might have been a previous technology, might have been a problem, somebody might have told them that it might be a problem. They've never actually seen it, but people have such a long memory of, especially when we talk about risks and things like that. Yeah, so definitely, if people start getting emotional, just listen very, very carefully.
And challenge it.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But it comes from a place, it's a challenge that comes from a place of respect.
Yes.
But definitely, yeah, don't.
Because I like what you said about it being all about people, because I have that discussion with my people a lot, and there's a technology issue, and I will guarantee you 99 times out of 100 it's a people issue, it's not a technology issue. Yeah. So it's just trying to get people to see things in a slightly different way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just related to this, I'm thinking about, we also model the skills. That's one service may be optimal, but for people that are they're not afraid and have the skills how to use it, and then otherwise they feel they don't have the skills, so they don't engage with the service. So would you also model how we teach, how we transfer skills? Someone uses a service and it's always amazing, and they will tell their friends or otherwise, I use this service. So I think I guess that's a problem. How do you transfer that knowledge? How do you engage with the service?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the issues, the most infuriating services that don't work, or services that have just come about to be. So they were never designed as a service, but little by little we added things to the service, and they've become these big complicated things that nobody can see that are true logic to it, but redesigning it is very time consuming. And the problem is that in that case, we force the users to learn our way of doing things. So you have to learn that this is how you, on a very minute level, this is how you enter your address, because if you do it a different way, it doesn't work, or you have to phone between this time and this time, because otherwise you'll stand in the phone queue for hours. So these are almost laughable examples, but in services, I remember working in a council, and we were in the queue in the morning to sign in. And a girl that didn't look like 17-year-old turns up, and she's in the queue, and she talks to the receptionist, and she says, I need to report a change of circumstances. How many 16, 17-year-old has ever said this sentence, I need to report a change of circumstances? Which actually means, which I learned afterwards, that something has changed in her life, and therefore she has to update her benefit claim. So the lady in the desk, very helpful, say, oh, you go to this desk. She queues, she talks to the person, and then who sends her to the phone, so she queues at the phone, she's on the phone. And then eventually she bounces back to the desk. Or they said that it's not the right service because it's not a change of circumstance, I've been made homeless. And here's the language we had taught a 17-year-old to report a change of circumstances instead of saying, I have nowhere to stay tonight. So we're forcing the users to learn our ways and our language and understand how our service works so that they can use it. Anyway, I've just killed them. Any other questions?